Our local newspaper, the Palm Beach Post, here in Florida, recently published the most gut-wrenching and repulsive cartoon with regards to the war in Israel on Sunday, January 26th, 2025. The Palm Beach Post posted this part cartoon in their, they published it in their print newspaper with the headline. It shows an Israeli soldier with what looks like a Red Cross person that are helping a hostage, an Israeli hostage, come back home. The headline of the article, of the cartoon, says some Israeli hostages are home after a year of merciless war. And the soldier says to the hostage, "Watch your step," as she walks over the corpses of over 40,000 Palestinians killed. This cartoon misrepresents the atrocities of Hamas in Israel. It is a grotesque distortion of reality that promotes a false and inflammatory narrative. You see, Hamas is an internationally recognized terrorist organization who deliberately hides between men, women, and children in order to promote their cynical agendas of death. It's a death cult that celebrates the death of their civilians. While Hamas celebrates the death of their innocent people, Israel mourns the death of innocent people. While Israel hides men, women, and children behind their soldiers, Hamas hides their soldiers behind women and children, deliberately attempting to increase civilian deaths in order to promote their horrific agenda of death, anarchy, and destruction. This war in Israel was started on October 7th, 2023 by Hamas. Israel was minding her own business when Hamas monsters invaded Israel and murdered, raped, beheaded, and distorted over 1,200 human beings in Israel, and then took over 240 civilians and soldiers captive into the dungeons of Gaza. Israel is doing everything she can to bring back those hostages home, whether they're dead or alive, as well as to uproot, to run a full-on root canal, to take Hamas out of Gaza, to destroy the organization so that there'll be nothing left and never be a threat of such a terrible proportion against Israel. This was an attack on Jewish people, the largest attack since the Holocaust, the most brutal attack on Israel since the Holocaust. Yet the Palm Beach Post here is putting out some sort of a moral equivalency, saying that since only some of the Israeli hostages are now back home after a year of merciless war, it wasn't worth it. This is what the Palm Beach Post is promoting. They're saying that it wasn't worth Israel carrying out this merciless war, as if this was a war that Israel chose. No, this is a war that Israel didn't start, but this is a war that Israel will end. A merciless war, which somehow they seem to imply results in the death of over 40,000 Palestinians, so much more than Jews that were killed, and therefore they're trying to put out some grotesque moral equivalency to say that it's not justified for Israel to bring her hostages back home. Amazingly, the ratio of civilian deaths in Gaza is the lowest ever in urban warfare. Even when America fought wars in Iraq and Afghanistan, the ratios of civilian deaths versus enemy deaths, versus soldiers' deaths of the enemy, were sometimes as high as 9-1, 9 civilians killed for every 1 enemy soldier killed. Yet here in Israel, with Israel's response to Gaza, to Hamas, to bring back her hostages, the civilian ratio, the ratio of civilian deaths to terrorist deaths is 1-1. For every 1 Hamas soldier killed, only one Palestinian civilian was killed. That is a ratio so low that it's never been seen in urban warfare, in the history of urban warfare, and it's going to be extremely challenging for any future war fought in urban settings to be able to keep such a very low threshold. This is indeed the most humane army. Israel, the IDF, is the most humane army and fighting the most humane war, which here is so macabre. The Palm Beach Post is so macabre in their depiction of the Israeli soldiers as somehow butchers that are wiping out innocent civilians. Bear in mind that the hostages are telling us that they were held in Gaza by civilians. In many cases, they were held in civilian homes by civilians, jeered at by civilian children. In many homes in Gaza, there are tunnels and rockets and explosives and all sorts of Hamas paraphernalia, which is stored under the beds and in the homes of civilians in Gaza. These civilians are not exactly civilians. They are combatants. They are terrorists in civilian clothing. And we can never forget that. This is a war that they started. Israel has every right to defend herself, to bring her hostages home, and to make sure that Hamas never does such a terrible attack again. What the Palm Beach Post is doing is putting out a very dangerous precedent. If the Palm Beach Post is truly interested in peace, then they must condemn the blatant propaganda and promote human dignity for all. We urge you at the Palm Beach Post, the editors of the Palm Beach Post, we urge you please to retract this cartoon, to publish an apology, not only to the Jewish people, but to all good people everywhere. You are not a representation of how we feel. This is not a representation of morality, of dignity, of honesty and integrity. This is a deliberate twisting of the truth. And we know that the editors of the Palm Beach Post can do better than that. Last year, there was a Nazi symbol projected on the building of the Palm Beach Post in West Palm Beach. We hope and pray that there was merely a projection from the outside, and God forbid, not a reflection of any of the values inside. We know that you are better than that, editors of the Palm Beach Post. And we urge you please to retract this, because how would you react if it was your daughter that was being held hostage inside of Gaza?